Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Boston series, 18 parishes in the southeastern corner of Lincolnshire with a windmill and vegetable type theme. Let's get cracking and see one. Welcome back to Boston, everybody, for round 3. Now in this episode and the next one, we'll be seeing a pair of villages which are nowhere near as big as the two we've already covered, Wrangle and Old Leake. This one's quite tiny. I've just spent 10 minutes walking from one end of it to the other, so that tells you how small this place is. We're beginning here at the northern end of it. That is the church there for St Helena, apparently, is the dedication for this one. So we'll go in there and check it out and see what else is in the parish of Leverton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Leverton, Rushy Reedy Farm. Today in Boston we hit Leverton, and in this episode we're going to see what life is like in one of the smaller villages around the Southern Lincolnshire town. We're still on the A52 and just south of Old Leake in this one. Leverton's name is a reference to reeds and rushes, and it makes a lot of sense when you think about how this landscape used to look. Before the Romans came along, this area would often be flooded by high tides. Reeds and rushes, therefore, were commonplace. There were patches of high ground in this watery, marshy land, and Leverton stood on one of them. Its early inhabitants occupied a makeshift shelter made from reeds and branches, which was perhaps covered then with mud. The high ground would eventually be turned into a sea bank by the Romans in order to hold back the tides. Today, that bank is roughly the route of the A52. There is a theory that Leverton could also mean harbour town, because at that point it was right on the sea. Of course, since then, the sea has been pushed back further and Leverton is a long way inland. Now surrounded by arable fields, it's another village in the middle of the silty, fertile fens, with vegetables growing at almost every turn. It has a church, a fire station, a car showroom and a shop, but not a lot more. Let's have a look at it. We start at Ostrich Corner, which gets its name from the building immediately to our left. That used to be the Ostrich Inn, a former pub dating from at least 1814, which is now a private dwelling. Centuries ago, this area wouldn't have looked like this. Where the Ostrich is today, there was a haven, and the two hamlets of Leverton Lucasgate and Leverton Outgate would have been part of the North Sea. It's hard to determine a boundary between these two hamlets, so this is all one section. The land these occupy had been lost in a flood during Roman times. After they left Britain, it was recovered and a new sea defence was constructed along the road from Freeston to Joy Hill in Wrangle. That defence runs along the course of Highgate and Moat Lane, passing through Ostrich Corner. It was the second sea defence to be built in this area. The Romans had previously had a go themselves. Their effort is the ridge of high ground that the A52 is now built on. Now, of course, the sea is much further away these days. A combination of fenland drainage, land reclamation, and a third sea bank at Leverton Marsh means that now Ostrich Haven is a distant memory. Boats would moor there in much the same way as they would at the harbour near Wrangell's Church. Speaking of churches, historical records suggest that there was a church in this area, predating the current one in Leverton village. In 1178 there were terrible floods and the sea banks broke, partly due to neglect. Legends suggest that whatever church was here was therefore swept away. Evidence for that is scant at best, and there's no definitive proof. Old maps, however, do show the centre of Leverton to have once been in the area of Leverton Lucasgate, so I guess it's possible. It's also postulated there may have even been 2 churches, but once again, that's just speculation. Driving into Leverton now, here we have the Three Horseshoes pub on the A52. This is not the first pub in the village to bear that name. The original Three Horseshoes was on Sheepgate, one of the narrow lanes between the A52 and Leverton Lucasgate. It closed in 1962. Next door to this one is Leverton Leisure Centre, which is effectively the village hall. These buildings were originally built to house Land Army girls because the Home Guard once had barracks on the sea bank, but they've now been demolished. This is the Church of St Helena on the A52. The church as we know it today was begun in the 14th century, but it wasn't completed until the 16th. The nave and the aisle are thought to be part of an earlier stone construction, perhaps dating back to the Norman conquest. Typically perpendicular in style externally, it has a 2-bay chapel attached to the chancel, and the bell tower has some notable carvings, often featured on heritage open day tours. The early 1890s was the last time a restoration took place here, but there have been multiple throughout its history. It's a lovely church, all in all. Now, if the church doesn't catch your attention, the house next door certainly should. It's painted a rather bright shade of pink. That's Northgate House, and it's one of the largest properties in Leverton. It's got 5 bedrooms, occupies some 4,500 square feet, and it's worth well north of £500,000. Look north at this point and you'll see a lay-by which forms a junction with Sheepgate. That area has the Travellers' Rest Cafe and the War Memorial, and it used to have a pub called the Bell Inn, which has now been demolished. In the other direction you'll find a bus stop, where the M3, B1, 57 and X57 all stop. Now for a wander down the very familiar A52. When compared to Wrangell, which seems to go on forever when you're on this road, Leverton's size is a marked difference. Its small stature means the temptation to speed through it is quite high. There are many reasons why you shouldn't, that's all I'll say. Close to that yellow flashing traffic control box is Leverton Stores, which has been operated by Premier since at least the mid to late 2000s. The A52 used to be a much windier road than it is today. It's been straightened somewhat, but there is still a discernible bend after that shop. A.D. Dickinson next, a used car dealership that's been in business for over 70 years now. You used to be able to buy petrol here. It was an Esso garage at one time. Rebranded to Burma in 1992 and again later to WCF, fuel sales ended in November 2000. Car sales, though, are still going well. On the next corner is Todd McCulloch's Bench. A military man, he worked in the Middle East on the Close Protection Circuit and helped evacuate Afghan locals during the fall of Kabul. He died in 2021 at the age of 30. On the other side of the junction is a parish notice board. Tick off Leverton, everyone. Perhaps something you'd not expect to see in Leverton is a small community fire station, but it has one. Here that is, just after the junction. When this was established, along with the garage and the shop, the centre of Leverton shifted again, this time from the end of Sheepgate to an area much further south along the A52. Several landmarks at the Sheepgate end have since disappeared, including a water pump dating from the 1860s and of course the 2 pubs, the Bell Inn and the Three Horseshoes. Arguably the modern centre now is this green, because it's where the village sign is. Now if you're travelling through Leverton on the A52, this is pretty much the point where you might think it all comes to an end. Well, it does in a way, because if you keep going that way you get to Bennington. But there's also another way to get to Bennington as well from here. If you turn around at this point and head back to the fire station, there's a road off to the left called Lacey's Lane, and if you follow that, there's more to Leverton than what you've already seen. Also part of Leverton's shift away from Sheepgate was the construction of a brand new housing estate off the A52. Several of these streets have the name Lacey, including Lacey's Avenue, Lacey's Close and Lacey's Lane. I had to put my genealogy head on at this point to see if I could trace the reason why Lacey is such a prominent name out here. I did find some bits relating to an Irish family who came from Rossadillisk in County Galway. They do have connections to Boston, but unfortunately not the Lincolnshire version. Several of them did emigrate to Boston, Massachusetts. Otherwise snookered as to the history of the Lacey name, this last section is just all about what you can see around here. It's all residential, save for one ominous looking gate that says danger keep out on it. Should you venture through that, it'll take you to something related to Anglian water. I didn't venture in, as I suppose I shouldn't. Most of the left-hand side of the road is given over to a huge green, much larger than the one on the A52 and bordered by a row of attractive bungalows. You wouldn't know this was the same village now, would you? Location definitely matters. Well, in a village such as this, it's good to know that there is this quiet open space away from the main road that runs through the place. And here that's definitely the case, because this is a world away from the A52, which dashes past Leverton on its way north out of Boston. It's good to know that places like this exist. And we've virtually finished with the village at this point, because from here there's just a couple more houses along this road towards Bennington before it all comes to an end. Lovely place, time to move on to the next one. That's it for Leverton. If you look on the map, you'll notice the parish is a long, thin piece of land stretching from the sea to the East Lindsey border. To begin the next one, we have to drive almost to that border and work our way back down again. Join me there for a village with a connection to a very famous London landmark. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.